Hello everyone, it's great to see you again. Thank you for being here with us. Before we dive into today's tale, I have an exhilarating update to share. I've launched a new YouTube channel, Soulfelt Chronicles, where I'll be sharing more engaging narratives. Take a moment to explore it, and if you enjoy what you see, consider giving a thumbs up and subscribing. You can find the link in the description box. Let us commence. It began with a quiet whisper, barely noticeable in the beginning. We had been together for years, experiencing the typical highs and lows of a relationship. Yet, this was unlike anything else. Rebecca, my wife, had become distant in a manner I struggled to articulate. The dialogue dwindled to a mere echo of itself, and the joy that once resonated within our walls faded away, leaving behind a disquieting hush. Initially, I attributed it to stress. We had endured a challenging time following the fire that consumed our old home, and relocating to my grandmother's house wasn't precisely her vision of a new beginning. Yet, there was an unmistakable quality in her demeanor that suggested this was more than merely about the fire. The small details began to accumulate. She would return home late from work, citing meetings that appeared to be mere figments of her imagination. Her phone, previously abandoned on the kitchen counter, transformed into an inseparable part of her being. The screen consistently angled itself away from my view. And then there were the nights she conveniently neglected to wear her wedding ring, asserting she had been in a hurry, or that it no longer fit properly. I attempted to overlook it. I reassured myself that every relationship goes through its stages, and perhaps we simply needed to rediscover our connection. However, it soon became clear to me that I was the sole one making an effort. The turning point was hardly noteworthy. It was within the quiet, ordinary instances. One evening, I inquired if she would like to enjoy one of her favorite shows with me, a ritual we once cherished deeply. She regarded me with an expression that suggested I had just posed a challenging problem to her. "No, I'm tired," she replied, her eyes still glued to her phone. Later that night, I caught her laughing at something on the screen, utterly captivated. That laughter wasn't sparked by a humorous meme. It was the kind that arises when you're engaged in conversation with someone who truly makes you feel vibrant. The signs had become impossible to overlook. She was distancing herself, and it seemed there must be another person involved. I attempted to engage in a dialogue with my thoughts, questioning whether my response was excessive, yet the truth loomed before me unmistakably. The understated hints, the abrupt shift in her attire, and the total absence of closeness all led to the same realization. She was beyond weary of her role as my wife. She was either involved with someone else or deeply contemplating the possibility. I realized it was essential to tackle the issue. But what's the best way to initiate that discussion? "Hey, are you being unfaithful to me?" That's not a topic to bring up lightly during a meal. Thus, I remained in anticipation. I took note. Patterns began to emerge before my eyes. How she would abruptly recall her commitments, or how her inflection would change when specific names were mentioned in discussion. She was more than just distant. She had already departed, at least in spirit. It felt as though I was cohabitating with someone I barely knew. Reflecting on the past, I realized that a part of me had come to terms with it already. She had simplified things by ignoring my presence entirely, yet a fragment of me clung to the possibility of something more. Perhaps, if I allowed her some distance, she might rediscover her path to me. It may seem unwise, I realize. Yet, when you've crafted a life alongside another, surrendering without a struggle feels impossible. That was my belief back then. The most challenging aspect wasn't the doubt. The anticipation lingered. Anticipating the moment she slips up. Anticipating her acknowledgement of the truth I was already aware of. Anticipating her to show a semblance of concern, even to the extent of attempting to conceal it. It seemed as though I was navigating through a fleeting existence, where each encounter brought me nearer to the unavoidable conclusion. And deep down, I believe she was aware of that as well. The evening when everything unraveled felt just like any other. Upon returning home from work, as per the routine, I found the house enveloped in silence. Winter had arrived, and the encroaching darkness enveloped everything in a weighty shroud. As I drove into the driveway, an unsettling feeling washed over me. The garage stood empty, and the porch light remained dark. Typically, that wouldn't have affected me, but considering the recent events, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. I stepped inside and called out for her. No reply. Initially, I considered the possibility that she had gone out, but as I navigated through the house, I observed that her bedroom light was illuminated. I ascended the stairs and discovered her at the dresser, applying her makeup. However, this was not her typical swift enhancement for daily tasks. She was not dressed in jeans and a sweater. She donned a black dress, a fresh addition to her wardrobe that I had yet to encounter. The hemline was elevated, and the neckline suggested more than it concealed. Beside her, a striking pair of stilettos awaited, the highest heels I had ever witnessed her don. I lingered in the doorway for a moment, simply observing. Engrossed in the meticulous application of her striking red lipstick, she initially failed to notice my presence. And then it struck me that this was more than just an ordinary evening. This was intentional. She was preparing herself for someone special. Though my chest was tight, I maintained my composure. I did not raise my voice. I didn't seek answers. Instead, I inquired, "Are we headed somewhere?" Her hand hesitated in the midst of applying. She locked eyes with me in the mirror, and her expression revealed not a hint of remorse, just annoyance. "No," she replied with a flat tone. "I am heading out now. I have a date lined up." I held back my response at first. It seemed she anticipated a dramatic outburst, a heated argument, or perhaps even some pleading. Yet, I remained rooted in place, gazing at her. "Did you catch what I said?" she insisted, her tone cutting. "I mentioned that I have a date. I'm seeing someone else." My heart raced, yet I held back, determined not to grant her the pleasure of a dramatic display. "No," I stated, my tone steady. She faced me, arms crossed, a clear expression of annoyance on her face. No, what do you mean? I told you you're not going out on a date, not while we share this space, at the very least. If you wish to pursue someone else, that's perfectly acceptable. However, gather your belongings and seek out another place to reside. As soon as you're free, I'll take care of the divorce papers, and then you can pursue your own path. She released a harsh, cutting laugh. "I'm not going anywhere," she declared. "This house captivates me, and once it belongs to me, I will transform it as I please. If you continue to behave foolishly, I will ensure that I receive the majority of the proceeds when we sell it." I inhaled deeply, clinging to the final vestige of my patience. "Do us both a favor," I urged. "Consider spending some time with your parents until this situation resolves. It's you who seeks to leave, not me." She wore a sly grin. "Oh, I shall return in 30 minutes, she remarked. "If you're still here when I return, I won't hesitate to involve the authorities. I might just say you threatened me, or perhaps even laid a hand on me. You're familiar with the process. They will keep you for 2 days, and by that time, I will have replaced the locks." A chill of resentment took root within me. She genuinely believed she could control me so effortlessly. "You're making a mistake," I said, my tone unsettlingly composed. "You believe you can intimidate me, but I'm here to stay." With a dramatic roll of her eyes, she pivoted back to the mirror, grumbling under her breath about the need to perfect her lipstick. I stepped out of the room, thoughts swirling in my head. She believed she held all the control, all the advantage. Yet she failed to recognize my true potential. If she intended to play unfairly, I could adjust accordingly. In the garage, I spotted the aluminum baseball bat propped against the wall, the very same bat I wielded during those summer games with friends. I grasped it, sensing its heft in my palm. Her vehicle was stationed outside. I could nearly envision her self-satisfied expression as she pictured herself driving away to rendezvous with her lover, abandoning me to simmer in my own thoughts. Not this evening. I returned it to the garage and detached the battery, placing it on my workbench. With a decisive strike of the hammer, the phone shattered into 3 fragments. Content, I returned the shattered fragments to her purse, leaving out the battery. Tonight, she had no intention of reaching out to anyone. Then, I spotted a small packet of condoms tucked away in her bag. For a brief moment, I thought about pricking them with a pin just to toy with her. However, I reconsidered my decision. She likely just accused me of attempting to set her up, and that was the last thing I wanted to deal with. When she entered the kitchen, she was completely dressed. A sleek black dress, elegant heels, and that bold red lipstick. She regarded me with a blend of annoyance and self-satisfaction, as though she had already triumphed in whatever perverse contest she was engaged in. "Out," she commanded, gesturing toward the door, as if I were an unwelcome guest. I remained still. I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, savoring each slow sip. "Wishing you a pleasant evening," I remarked nonchalantly. Her gaze sharpened. "What did you do?" she inquired, her tone now more cutting. I grinned and savored another sip. "I suggested that you go check your car." Her heels echoed sharply as she marched out the front door. Shortly after, her voice rang out in a shout, frustrated, exasperated, seething with anger. She burst back into the house, her face flushed with anger. "What on earth happened to my car?" she shouted. I shrugged, maintaining a playful tone. "It's situated on the street. Anything was possible." "You scoundrel," she spat. "I'll just give him a call to come get me. Please, feel free," I urged, motioning towards her bag. "Your phone will be necessary for that." Her expression momentarily stiffened, and then she swiftly pulled the phone from her purse. Upon discovering it wouldn't power up, her anger escalated to unprecedented heights. "You damaged my phone?" I reclined and folded my arms across my chest. Perhaps a more watchful gaze would have been wise. At that moment, she was nearly pulsating with fury. She traded her heels for sneakers and marched out, likely considering the option of knocking on a neighbor's door to borrow their phone. I observed from the window as she moved from one house to another, her frustration mounting with each unanswered door. By the time she reached the end of the block, her voice had risen to a shout. I rested against the counter, savoring my coffee, and bided my time. I realized it was just a question of when she would either discover someone ready to assist her or reach a point of desperation that would lead her to involve the authorities. Regardless of the circumstances, I was prepared. She believed she had everything under control, but by the end of the night, she understood just how mistaken she had been. It wasn't long before events shifted, but not in the way I had anticipated. With each sip of my coffee, the rhythmic sound of her heels echoed from the floor above. Then there was silence. That was my signal to see what she was engaged in. I caught a glimpse through the window just as she made her way toward the garage. She was determined to see her plans through, no matter the obstacles. I was familiar with Rebecca. She was impulsive, undeniably, yet her desperation followed a familiar pattern. She had already come to the conclusion that her car was no longer operational, and it seemed she must have presumed I had left my Suburban behind. The creature, as she fondly referred to it, lingered in the garage, poised to transform her evening. Unbeknownst to her, I had already disabled the garage door opener, anticipating a move just like this. I moved silently, glancing through the side door as she settled into the driver's seat of the beast. The engine sprang to life, emitting a deep, guttural roar that reverberated throughout the garage. For a moment, I considered intervening, but I chose to allow her to navigate her own chaos. She pressed the garage door button, and when there was no response, she pressed it once more. Frustration flickered in her expression, yet, rather than pausing to reflect, she opted for the most quintessentially Rebecca response. She pressed the accelerator. The creature surged ahead, crashing into the garage door with a harsh metallic shriek that sent shivers coursing through me. The sheer force of the 454 horsepower engine overwhelmed the aging door. The air was filled with the ominous sounds of tearing metal and cracking as the beast erupted from the garage, pulling the remnants of the door behind it. However, that wasn't the most troubling aspect. A police cruiser was parked directly behind the garage, likely in the most inconvenient spot imaginable. 2 officers had just shown up, following Rebecca's earlier threats to involve the police. The beast collided with the cruiser, delivering a blow so powerful that it sent the vehicle sliding backwards several feet, its front end crumpling like a discarded piece of paper. As one of the officers swung open the driver's side door, the crash suddenly erupted. The door burst open with a force that sent him reeling, toppling him to the floor. His partner, a fiery redhead I recalled from high school, was already in action, pulling Rebecca out of the beast by her hair before she could fully grasp what had just occurred. "Get on the ground!" the red-headed officer commanded, her voice resonating through the neighborhood. Rebecca let out a frantic cry, her words lost in the chaos as she struggled against being pulled to the ground. She merely wept and swore as the officer placed the cuffs on her, not putting up any real resistance. In the meantime, I hurried to assess the condition of the officer who had been injured. His nose was unmistakably fractured, and blood flowed down his face, yet he remained aware. "Hold still," I instructed, gently cradling his head to ensure his neck remained steady. "Assistance is coming soon." The following 20 minutes unfolded in a whirlwind of disorder. Curious onlookers emerged from their homes, some daring enough to venture outside and stare in fascination. Ambulances rushed in, their lights ablaze, while an increasing number of police cars crowded the street. I responded to inquiries while glancing at Rebecca, who was seated in the rear of another cruiser, handcuffed and crying out like a child caught in the act of theft. As the chaos subsided, Rebecca found herself en route to the hospital, nursing a bruised ego, a stiff neck from the airbag, and an expanding list of charges. Irresponsible actions that put others at risk, destruction of property, and the act of attacking a law enforcement officer using a vehicle, just to highlight a few instances. I found myself in the driveway, observing the remnants of the creature being towed away. I ought to have been enraged, yet, truthfully, I simply experienced a sense of relief. This was more than the vehicle or the chaos she had created in the garage. It was about finally obtaining proof, irrefutable evidence, that Rebecca was her own greatest adversary. Despite all her threats, manipulation, and arrogance, she had ultimately reached an impasse, both literally and figuratively. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. With her arms crossed and a fierce glare directed at me, she looked as though I had committed the ultimate betrayal, a striking irony given the situation at hand. "You're abandoning me completely," she finally exclaimed. My lawyer responded with a calm assurance. "That's not entirely true. We're happy to allow you to keep one of the bedroom sets due to sentimental reasons." It was as if I could sense the tension in her jaw, the unmistakable sound of teeth clenching together. With a fierce determination, she exited the room, leaving her lawyer to handle the negotiations alone. Ultimately, she retained her car, a fraction of the cash she had taken out, and little more. Her attorney recognized the bleakness of her situation and persuaded her to reach a settlement before matters deteriorated further. The judge was quite decisive when concluding the divorce proceedings. He praised my initiative in safeguarding my assets, his courteous manner of expressing that Rebecca had been outwitted at every opportunity. As the gavel struck, I found myself liberated, while she was left to navigate the tangled legal chaos she had unleashed by crashing the beast into a police cruiser. For me, it was never about seeking revenge. It revolved around the instinct to protect oneself. Rebecca attempted to manipulate, intimidate, and bully her way into claiming everything, but she misjudged my strength. She assumed I would simply give in and allow her to triumph. I opted for a more patient approach, and when it concluded, I departed with my self-respect preserved. Once the chaos subsided and the ink on the divorce papers had dried, I found myself with a rare moment to exhale. Initially, it felt peculiar, as if I were entering a narrative that belonged to another. For years, my daily life, my reflections, and even my joy had centered on Rebecca and our union. Now, she had simply vanished. The house was serene, enveloped in a tranquil stillness that felt comforting rather than isolating. I was finally able to concentrate on my own desires and needs, rather than perpetually treading lightly in her presence. In the initial months, I focused on realigning my life, renovating my home, rekindling friendships from the past, and rediscovering hobbies I had overlooked for quite some time. It wasn't merely a means of diversion. It was about rediscovering my essence from before the chaos unfolded. I began visiting the shooting range once more. It had always been something I cherished, yet in the final years of my marriage, I found myself neglecting it. During one of those excursions, I encountered Olivia, the very officer who had taken Rebecca into custody during the garage incident. She appeared in jeans and a casual top, a striking departure from the uniformed, serious demeanor I had previously observed. After chatting for a bit, I discovered that she was also single. Her divorce was tumultuous, yet it didn't reach the level of chaos that mine did. One thing naturally flowed into the next, and I found myself asking her out. To my astonishment, she agreed. That initial encounter was truly remarkable. I arrived in my finest suit, perhaps a bit too much, yet she appeared to value the gesture. From the start, she was straightforward about her disinterest in games or drama, and to be honest, I felt the same way. After 9 months, we tied the knot, and I can truly say it has been the most joyful period of my life. She's more than my wife. She is my companion in every possible way. We have created a life together, founded on mutual respect and trust, elements that were absent for a significant period in my prior marriage. I've picked up snippets about Rebecca from our shared connections. She entered into marriage twice again, and from what I've observed, her second spouse appears to be maintaining a certain level of control over her. That's nice for him, I suppose. I have let go of any resentment I once felt toward her. It took some time to arrive at that understanding, but I came to see that clinging to resentment would only anchor me in the past. Currently, my life is straightforward and satisfying. Recently, my wife and I marked our 25th wedding anniversary with a river cruise in Europe, a journey she had always envisioned. My children have matured and are thriving, and I feel an immense sense of pride for them. Just last week, we passed down my grandmother's old house to our daughter as a wedding gift. It felt like a perfect culmination of events. The house had witnessed countless moments of anguish and change, yet now it embarks on a fresh journey for her. Occasionally, I reflect on those tumultuous times with Rebecca, not with sorrow, but with appreciation. They revealed much about my identity and the extent of my abilities. Life rarely unfolds according to our designs, yet often it is the unforeseen paths that guide us precisely to our destined destination. As I stand here now, I wouldn't alter a single detail. Dear listeners, we invite you to share your insights in the comments section below. Also, remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected.